Being congruent. My mission in every program that I share anywhere in the country is I'm hoping that this morning is going to give you an opportunity to create a little bit more harmony in your own life so that when you have that congruence, it comes out in your relationships with other people. You're at your best. You're doing your best. You're really not only lifting yourself up, but you lift others up too when you're congruent. And I have a formula for that as an educator. I believe we all have attitudes. It's the way we see the world, situations. It's the options we give ourselves in challenging situations. And it's also what we believe to be true and right and good. We all have we have aptitudes. We have these skills and abilities. Some of them, the good Lord gave them to you when you were born, whether you asked for them or not. Many of them you acquired and nurtured because when you were little, you were lucky and you had people like you around you who helped you to learn and grow. And again, we got the cream of the crop in childcare in this part of the country because you didn't have to be here today. You chose to come and sharpen your own saw, as Stephen Covey said. So you're continuing to work on those aptitudes. But friends, you can have the best of attitudes and the strongest of aptitudes, and they don't do you any good unless you act on them. And that's why when you say, I should do this, and you do something else, that's not congruent. And that's the kind of stuff where at the end of the day, you look back on what you did and how you did it or what you didn't do, you feel regrets. Real quick, they did a survey. They asked senior citizens in the prime of their life, look back on your life. Do you have any regrets? And of course, that's a highly rhetorical question. Of course they did. But what was interesting was the things that they had regrets about were not things that they had done that they wished they hadn't. It was those things that they wished they would have done and didn't. And those moments of opportunity, they don't come real often. And being congruent and making a good choice the first time around grossly reduces the desire to have a do-over. So let me give you an example. We probably all spent time in airplanes, and I'll bet you heard about these stories a couple of years ago. There was a plane that just landed in Newark, and they taxied up to the jetway, opened the door of the plane, passengers were starting to get off the plane. Something happens between a flight attendant and a passenger. We don't know what the passenger did, but we know exactly what the flight attendant did because he got his button pushed. So he walks up to the intercom, he says, all right, that's it. I'm not taking this anymore, and everybody on this airplane can just... And then what he said next was not nice, so I'm not going to repeat it. But then he went over and he opened up the other door to the airplane and activated the emergency escape chute. Is this ringing a bell for anybody? Okay, and then the thing that he did next, and this is what endeared him to a lot of people, he grabbed 2 beers off the beverage cart, slid down the escape chute, walked off the tarmac. That was also his exit interview, wasn't it? Because he was interviewed later on, this flight attendant Slater, and he was saying, I really would like my job back. I really liked what I did. And see, they spent a lot of time and money training flight attendant Slater and all these other flight attendants. Contrary to public opinion, their first and foremost goal is not to bring us a beverage of our choice shortly after takeoff. It's our safety. And so they are trained to deal with intoxicated passengers, obnoxious passengers, terrorist passengers, and if all else fails, they are supposed to go up to the other flight attendant and tag off and say, will you take over with that bozo in 21C before I punch his lights out? Whoops, and knock the remote out of my hand. Well, good, we stayed where we needed to there, so that was good. I'll try to calm down here and not get too excited like that. So he just set all that training on the shelf. And I know that at that moment when he was reaching for the microphone, there was a little voice in the back of Slater's mind. And that little voice was saying, don't say this thing that you feel welling up from inside. How many of you can remember somebody or something pushes your button and you feel the emotional impulse coming up? And it isn't out yet. And we have the opportunity to exercise what we call, and I think a lot of you do this with the children, it's called impulse control. But he didn't do that. He set all that training on the shelf, he ripped that off, and then later on he had his regrets. So, let me give you an example now of congruence. You remember the name Sully? Who is Sully? He landed the plane, the Miracle on the Hudson. This is rarely a survivable scenario in a cockpit. Usually when the pilot goes through this training and you ditch a jet in the water, it's not a good conclusion. And so here's Sully. He's flying and he's got a passenger or plane full of people. He hits the geese. He's a glider in the sky now without any power. There was a voice going on in the back of Sully's mind, and it was saying, "We are going to die!" And Sully chose to be congruent. And he engaged his best attitudes. And he engaged his best aptitudes. And because of Sully's high level of congruence that day, he did what rarely happens. He lands a jet on a river. Everybody went home and got a hug that night. Now, friends, you are not flying an airplane at 35,000 feet. But every day that parents bring their children to your place, you are in charge of a really important flight. There is a huge amount of trust that's being placed on you by those parents. And those kids, they don't realize how much trust they're putting in you, but they are. They're just expecting and hoping that it's going to be a good day, and they're going to grow a little bit because they were with you.